Welcome to Jammin' with Jason Mefford, a show where we discuss topics relevant to chief audit executives and professionals in audit, risk, and compliance. We discuss the technical and soft skills needed to navigate the minefields of organizations. You hear best practices and practical advice for helping you advance your career, and we'll even talk about music, mindfulness, and psychology, because we can. So sit back and relax while you listen to the #1 podcast in the world for internal auditors, unscripted and unedited. Hey everybody, I am back and talking with Nathan Pickard today from 9B. And we've got some, I met him a few months ago and we just kind of, touched base back and forth. Has a really cool product that they're working on, that they're rolling out here. That's very relevant to what most of you are doing. And I think some of the pain points many of you are feeling as you're trying to transform your internal audit department. So I'm not going to tell you too much more now, but we're going to get into it because you got to listen to the whole episode. So Nathan, welcome. How you doing today?
Doing well.
It's like I said, it's exciting. When we talked a little while ago about what you guys are doing, it's like kind of like a little mind blow for me, because it's like, oh man, I can see how this can really, really help lots of people, right? So maybe just jump in at the first, just kind of explain a little bit about, what you do, what your company does, and then we'll dig in, because I think, like I said at the beginning, there's certain pain points people are feeling, and they're like, how am I going to get through this? Well, guess what? Listen to this episode, because you're going to find out, you're going to get some answers today as actually some easy ways for you to get past some of this stuff.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. So 9B, we're all about data analytics, and specifically with a focus on internal audit analytics. And I have about 15 years experience doing data analytics. Started out with the city of Tulsa, and have a certified internal auditor, certified information systems auditor designations. But really just over the years, went to all the classes, all the training on continuous auditing, always got super excited and never really knew how to pull it off with all the other duties and responsibilities of being an employee in an audit department. And so then I went over to Williams, which is an energy company here in Tulsa, and they wanted me to help start a data analytics function in their audit department. And we had a lot more resources there to do amazing things, learned a lot, had a team of data analysts, and still we got stuck in this phase of like helping out auditors with their audits and building out great data analytics, being excited about the coding we did, about the data discovery. But then once that audit was done, we never saw our data, all that work that we did, that we put into the coding, we never really got to see it come around again. So just still had that dream of the idea of continuous audit, continuous risk assessments. And it wasn't until I left Williams and I had some requests from different companies to do consulting that I really had this chance to say, hey, what if we approach this as building software? And so I got the head of Agile here in Tulsa to be my Scrum Master. And we just like brainstormed with thousands of Post-it notes, as you can see behind me, how to actually do continuous auditing from a software perspective. So we do, when we take this agile approach where we spend, for every module we build out, we spend 2 weeks doing data discovery and planning, where we just go in, we learn all of the tables that are important for a process like AP, and how they relate to each other. We build out an entity relationship diagram that shows how everything is working from like a data flow perspective. And then we all, at the same time, me as the internal auditor, so I've got a guy that's just great at programming, that's digging into the database. And then I, as more of the internal auditor background, I'm interviewing the process owners. I'm determining analytics are important, and I'm working with the developer who's in the data, and I'm saying, hey, can you find this? Can you find this? Because I'd like to do this kind of analytic. And so we've built out a backlog, kind of this agile Scrum backlog of analytics during the planning phase. And then we spend a 2-week sprint where we just build out those analytics. Sometimes we have 100 analytics that we want to build out in 2 weeks. And so we have to prioritize, and we create user stories based on what the user of this analytic is going to need. And all of that is very according to the Scrum method. And so a lot of times we'll end up with 30 to 50 analytics that we built out over 2 weeks, because we got all of the data just perfect for us to build out analytics. And then we do one more sprint where we visualize it. And so that we use Tableau for the visualization. And every analytic is built in this software coding methodology to where it'll work together with every other analytic. So what we end up with over building the software is this beautiful, like, one-page report. And the one-page report shows you over the quarter or the month, whatever kind of time frame you want, what has happened across your organization. So across AP, across your purchasing card, your GL. I think we've done around 8 to 10 modules now. And it really just shows you just like a real-time risk assessment of what's going up, what's going down. And then when you choose one that's gone up, let's say in Tableau, it will then tell you where to do your next agile audits. And it gets specific. It says, like, this process step is where maybe 60% of the increased risk has occurred. And so that's where you should do your agile audit. And then one of the things that we weren't planning on was just how effective this is for the management side as well. So another whole piece is, how do you do training of the process performers? And so that's for management to work on. And so the tool also says, like, these 4 people caused 80% of the risk. And so, and here's the areas where they need to be trained, the exact problems they're having. And so you can go in and train them. And then the most awesome part is you get to see all the results of your work. So you did your agile audit on this process step, and next month you can see how the risks performed. Did they actually go down? And you can really start using your retrospective time in your agile process to say, okay, what happened with these risks? Did they go down? How can we change our process of agile auditing to do better? That kind of thing. I don't know. That was a big number. Sorry about that.
Well, no, and it's so what I'll try to do too, because I know you're much on the technical side too, and have been doing software development, coding for a long time. So even though you've got the audit background, you're still kind of a coder. So if I need to, I'll try to translate a little bit for people that aren't. But a couple things that you said in there where I'd like to dig in a little bit deeper, because we've been talking about data analytics for a long time. Okay, I mean, I remember going back into the 90s. Yeah, we were doing stuff, but it's just never really got the traction. And one of the things that you said that I think is one of the reasons, one of the mistakes that most people are making, is they're treating data analytics as part of a project. Yep. Instead of building it into the overall process. Mm-hmm. Right. So back again, when you were at Tulsa and at Williams, and you're like, hey, we did this great work, and then the project's over and we never use it again. Yeah. Well, you're not really leveraging all of that work, right? You're thinking of it as a discrete project, and then never actually using it again. So you're never getting the efficiencies out of it. You're always trying to relearn, redo all of these things, where the beauty, of you kind of stepping back and now helping companies with this is, look, don't just do it once. You build it into the process, and now it actually helps you in doing all of these other things, right? So don't just build it, put it on the shelf, and then never go back to it.
Yeah, that hit me so hard recently. I was talking to Williams. They have a new chief audit executive. I was talking to her, and she didn't even know what we had done in the past. And she said, we're starting at ground zero with data analytics. And it just killed me, because I was like,
I did all that work and you're not using it.
Oh man, you spent way over $1 million on 3 data analysts that did so much work, and it's all, nobody even knows where it is now, because we all left, and yeah, no continuous part about it at all. So,
well, and the other thing, like, you were talking about how you can use the different analytics to work with each other as well. And I think, the example that you gave is, I think what a lot of people have been, what we should be doing, but they're not realizing that the information is there, right? Like, so you said, hey, the risk went up in this particular area. Well, why did it go up? Well, there's these 4 individuals in what they're doing, Pareto principle, folks. We've been talking about this forever too, right? Focus on the 20% that causes the 80% impact.
Yeah.
Well, now you can actually visualize and see that with some of the analytics. And so we can be much more efficient in what we're doing, right? And that it lines into, as we were talking before we even got started here, the 3 things that a lot of people are working on: continuous risk assessment, agile, and data analytics. Well, they can all and should all be going together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And using them as a process, instead of thinking about everything just as an individual project.
Yeah.
And I think it seems like that's a big mindset that audit still hasn't gotten past. And again, like you said, it doesn't matter whether it's a small company, whether it's a big company. I mean, William spent $1 million on a couple of analytics, and then they're not using them, right? It's like, I mean, you should be continuing to use these things, right? So how are you kind of helping companies do this now? Because I've got to imagine there's a lot of people that are listening that are like, yep, been there, we've done this, we haven't used it, we don't know where it's at, people have left, we don't know what they did, right? Because there's a lot of intellectual capital that walks out of the door each year. So how have you kind of helped companies overcome some of these challenges that most every internal audit department has?
Yeah, I think that's where we were trying to come up with a solution when we were in the companies of how to pull this off. And it was always like, can you just give us like 50% of our time to work on a continuous audit piece? And it just never worked, because we did good work and we always had so much demand from the auditors for the projects they were doing right then. And so we never got to really focus. And I think that's where starting a company where we get contracts to do this, and we can actually spend the time to develop it out as a software has been the answer that I've been asking, like, just going to all these conferences and they tell you the theory of continuous auditing. It's like, I want to see it actually in real life work, and so I don't know. I think another piece is when you put an analyst in a group of internal auditors, they are a very different type of person. And so for me and the other analysts that I've worked with, we've always felt very stifled by the environment we're in, whereas we want to be, I think we're a lot more creative. I was an art major in college before I moved into accounting, and just a lot more creative, and really wanting that like back and forth with other creative individuals. I think is probably why you see analysts kind of not staying very long with an audit group, or just ending up losing a lot of steam from when they start. So I think for us, it's been creating a company that's all about the creative side, all about celebrating this idea of data analytics in an amazing way. And I don't know, I think that's part of the answer that we found.
Well, it's interesting, you know, as you were talking about kind of from your perspective, right? Because you have the audit background, but you're artistic and creative in nature. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that because, you know, coders, analysts, they're really kind of creating art, but it's numerical art. And in fact, you know, for those of you that know a lot about art, it's all about math at the end of the day, right? The proportions, Fibonacci numbers, all kinds of stuff. Okay. But we don't have time on, on this episode to get into this, but it's amazing. And I think one of the things that you brought up is probably, again, one reason why so many people are struggling with this is they're bringing in people that need to have a certain skill set to do the work the right way, but they don't really mesh with the culture that we built in internal audit. And so it's almost like, you know, you're the redheaded stepchild or the bastard child. And it's kind of like people just tell you, well, I need an analytic to do this on this project. Go build it for me, right? And so you go off, you do a discrete project, and you're over there on the side going, yeah, but we could do all these other things, right? And it kind of, and this is one of the reasons why I love what you guys are doing with your software is once something has been built, you don't need to go reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
But everybody is trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's a huge suck of time and energy, right? It's like, you know, one of the clients that I have, they've got a great software product, and it's the same thing. It's like, you know, for $10,000 a year, you can like get all of the knowledge that this company has amassed for 20 years and save yourself hundreds or thousands of hours worth of time, right? Yeah. But there's still a lot of people that are like, no, damn it, I've got to do it myself. I've got to map everything myself. And it's like, why? Right? If somebody's already kind of invented it or figured it out, why don't you just latch on to it? And I think, you know, again, as we've talked a little bit, we haven't shared much here, but what you guys are doing with your software is effectively, hey, we've already developed a lot of these analytics already. All you got to do is plug it into your data, right? Because somebody's already built it, and it's kind of like a plug and play kind of thing that you can do.
Yeah, that's what we love is the way we built it is very object oriented. So like you've got your data layer that you have to do your data discovery, figure out what tables are interacting with what tables, and get you to those final data points. And we call that our prep table. And so when our prep table is done, then the next layer is all these analytics that we've already built, and they can just use that prep table. And so, yeah, it is. It's very much plug and play. And I mean, we get excited about all the ways to make it even more customizable, where we have a survey that goes out and says, what are your Pickard limits? And when they answer that number, then that goes and plugs into our script that looks for when they do a split transaction that goes over their Pickard limit, that kind of thing.
Okay, so you've actually built it in so that even though the scripts are kind of pre-built, like you said, they put in their limit, it customizes, you know, 95% of it is already built. You just need to know what the limits are so that then the analytic can run based off of the set parameter that you have, right? Beautiful. Instead of having to rewrite the whole script, all you got to do is tell them, hey, it's $5,000. Okay, sweet. $5,000. Now we know where all your data is, so we know where to pull the information is. Because again, it's not just as simple as saying, here, click, 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 right? You still have to select the data source that you're coming from. But once that work is done, then a lot of these analytics that you've already built can start functioning operationally for companies as well. I'm guessing that would save people hundreds of hours.
Yeah, and the other thing that we're excited about is really working with all of the new cloud ERP systems because they have a lot less customization on them than the server-based ones. And so we get excited when someone comes to us and says, we want it for this cloud system because we know once we spend the time to do that discovery, it's kind of a one and done thing, and we can apply it to any other customer of that cloud ERP system. So we get excited about that.
Well, yeah, that's interesting because I never even thought about that too. But yeah, as the software companies have moved more to their cloud instances, there's less customization by the end user, and so because of that, it actually makes the data analytics side of it easier
So much easier.
because
Yeah.
you're not trying to work around a bunch of customization.
Yeah.
Wow, I hadn't even thought about it that way.
We're real excited when we get a request for a new cloud one. We're like, this we can take, and all of these other people will get the benefit of the time spent on this data discovery, and that's a big part of our process is we want every sprint to have really good products on their own, and so even the planning sprint, you get like a flow chart of your process that's helpful, and you get an ERD of all the tables that are used and how they interact, and you can use that for one-off analytics if you want. Now you know how those tables work. On one cloud system, we have a data dictionary of 9,000 pages, and so it's a PDF, so it's like, oh god, you got to read that thing word by word, but that's the time that you don't want someone else to have to spend and pay for. Like once we do it once on a cloud system, then the 6,000 customers that use that cloud system that we're doing it for can really reap the benefits of that. So,
Well, and it leads me kind of to another challenge that I think a lot of people have is everybody knows they should be doing more with this, so they want to hire people, but they can't find people to hire, right? And so I might get the numbers a little bit wrong, but the numbers that I was kind of told, right, is in the industry there's only about 10% of the auditors that also have data analytics skills, right?
yeah.
So 10%, not very many auditors, right? So here's a little career hint for everybody. If you're interested, there's only 10%. So learn some more about data analytics, right? If you don't know where to go, then there's a whole bunch of courses on C-Risk Academy, by the way. And it's pretty easy to just go click and start learning, right? At least to start getting some of the basics down. But so there's a huge, there's only about 10% of the people that have these skills already. But I've heard that the job postings that are requiring both skills is about 30%, which means there's a 20% gap. So 20% of those jobs are never going to be filled because there's nobody with those skill sets, right? So either we've got to get individuals to skill up, learn how to do it so then they can be available for those jobs, or the other option is you bring somebody in, right? Which is what a lot of people do. They'll hire a consulting company that comes in, they do analytics on a project basis, and then the person leaves. Well, next time you want to do them, what do you have to do? You got to hire that person again, right? With your solution, you don't have that, I think, right?
Yeah, that's a big goal. We see it as more of a SaaS tool, a software as a service, where you pay an annual fee, and then we make sure that they run every week, however often you want them to run. These analytics run we treat it as software, so we do bug fixes if there's bugs, and everyone gets the benefit of those. But we also do, every time someone has another analytic idea, or we have another idea, that can be applied to everybody that it helps. And so, yeah, we see it as a different model that I think really speaks to that problem of, there's just not enough analysts to go around. So if we can help 100 companies with 5 analysts, I mean, that's a big, that really helps fill that gap. I think, and we hope that it's way more effective than trying to hire your own person or train someone when to start from nothing.
Well, and because, again, it just, I'm going to throw out some basic numbers, right? And um, if you were to hire somebody, bring somebody in as a data analyst, I'm guessing you're probably going to spend at least $100,000 a year for that person, at least here in the US, if not more, probably, right? But you're probably looking at a minimum $100,000 for a salary to bring somebody in. Then you have the one person. You've still got the problem of if the person, because of the culture or whatever, after 6 months decides to leave, well, now you lose all that knowledge. Plus, now you got to go hire somebody else new again, right?
Yeah.
You can bring in, and a lot of them are the big firms. You can bring in somebody to do a consulting project. And again, I'm guessing minimum's probably 50-ish up to, like you said with Williams, I mean, they probably spent $1 million on some of these analytics, right? And then again, if the firm leaves, if the people at the firm leave who did it, again, you've got these beautiful analytics that you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on that are not working for you even still, right?
Yeah.
Versus actually having them built into a software. And this is why, again, I mean, I've said this a couple of times, but I love the model you guys are using too, because it goes along with how businesses are run now.
Yeah.
Right? The whole idea that whatever your competitive advantage is, the unique thing that the company does, that's what you have in-house.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else that's possible, you outsource to somebody who can do it better and quicker and faster and cheaper than you do, right? And so a lot of these back office administrative functions, even in very large companies, are not actually in-house, right? IT is one of those things that's outsourced to other companies. Accounting is actually even outsourced in some huge companies, right? Because there's a lot of that stuff in the back. And people probably like glossed over what you just said about bug fixing, patches, making sure that the analytics are running all the time, that you guys are actually doing in the background that the internal audit department doesn't have to be doing.
Right.
And it's not in their core, skill set either to do that. And so instead of having to build a whole department with maybe multiple people in it, you can outsource most of the heavy lifting on the back end and then just focus on, hey, what do I want the analytics to do, based on the particular project or the process that you're actually working on. So, it's just a great model. And like I said, it goes along with how businesses are actually working now. So
Yeah.
we need to start thinking that way too.
I know. Yeah, I've become a big believer in that just from starting a company and seeing like all of these SaaS products that we use now as a small company, because those aren't the skill sets we have, and we want someone that does have that skill set to be running that piece for us. And we love it. And even hiring this Scrum Master to teach us how to do the software development piece was just one of those things where it's like, wow. I mean, we could have tried to, I read all these agile auditing things and went to the seminars and things, and I still couldn't figure out how to do it. And then hiring someone who really lives and breathes agile Scrum and bringing him in, it was just mind blowing, the difference. And so anyway, yeah, I'm a huge believer in that. Bring in the experts, and you be the expert at what you're the expert.
Well, and don't waste your time trying to figure it out when somebody else has already figured it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, again, so just like you were saying there with agile, right? And you can take any of these different topics, right? You read the books, you went to seminars or to different trainings and stuff, but you still couldn't figure out how to click it all together and make it work for internal audit, right? Well, as an example, one of the guys, we just actually came out with a new course on C-Risk about this. Took the guy 3 years to figure it out
Yeah.
and to actually make it work so that it actually practically works and people can actually do it, right? So, just like with what you guys are doing, it's like, do you really need to spend 3 years trying to figure it out, or do you just leverage what somebody else has already figured out? Right. And again, I know some people like to make things hard. I prefer to have things easy and bring in the people that I need to be able to help with that. Because like you said, I do the same thing in my businesses. We outsource a lot of things that, yes, we could do internally.
Right.
Okay, we could do it internally. Could we do it cheaper? Maybe in hard monthly cash costs, we might be able to do it easier, but long term and risk reduction standpoint, way cheaper to outsource it when you start to consider some of the other things that could go on.
Yeah.
So, as internal audit, we need to, I think, start thinking that way. I talk a lot about us getting out of 100 years ago. This is one of those areas too. You don't have to completely build a whole data analytics department to actually start doing data analytics. You can leverage and actually, utilize what other people have already kind of started to do and bring in people to help you, because yeah, and like you said, I mean, I think this is kind of hopefully everybody that's listening today, you're starting to see how some of these things can work together, right? And can help you overall. And we talked about some of the problems people are having. You try to find somebody, you can't find anybody to hire. You hire them, they're here for a while, then they leave. You do data analytics for a particular discrete project, you spend a bunch of time and money doing them, and then you never use them again, right? These are all mistakes that people are making. It's like, people, stop making these mistakes. There's a better way to do it.
Yeah, and I think on that topic, just of bringing in those companies to do a data analytic project, you end up, what we've seen multiple times is as a pitfall is people go after analytics thinking of it from a kind of this exception report basis, where they want to say like, okay, we're going to do this analytic, it'll show us all the exceptions and then we'll go investigate those exceptions. And I've never seen that methodology last, because they quickly realize just how many false positives you end up having, and it takes so much time and effort to deal with all of those. And so that's something that just over the 15 years, I was like, there's got to be a better way to write where you don't get stuck in this exception like pool that you can't get out of. And so that's been the exciting part of building it as a software product, is where every analytic we just see as a little building block. And we always say, don't look at this one just on its own. Like, maybe it's weekend transactions. Well, maybe there's 100 reasons why they would have a weekend transaction, but it's so
like we run our operations 24/7. I mean, come on, right?
Yeah. So that's where we put together, and we were just looking at this before the call, for a purchasing card transaction. When you look at it in our visualization, it actually brings up to the top the transaction that had the most risks. And so this one transaction had 17 risk flags. And so it had a duplicate, it had like the approver approved it in less than 30 seconds after approving the one prior. So they didn't adequately look at the receipts, pull them up and look at them. And it was 17 of those types of things. And weekend transactions was one of them. It was on the weekend. And so it's not that the weekend is this one exception that you have to go look at every single exception. But when you see that along with 16 other flags, it's like, oh shoot, yeah, this transaction is the one that I should be spending my time with. And I think that's where we have a lot of fun with the software part, and just where all the analytics can really work together, and you can show the highest possibility of a fraud, or bring it all up and look at it and say, this process step is having the highest problem area, and that's where we should focus in agile audit. So I think that's where we get excited, is really getting away from the exception, like investigation pitfall.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think, again, that is probably a mindset issue that we have, that I think a lot of people in audit think, oh, data analytics are a way for us to catch exceptions, right? But data analytics is more than just catching exceptions, right? It's actually looking at where the processes are working right as well, and kind of monitoring that kind of from the continuous auditing standpoint. So yeah, that's probably another mindset thing that we need to kind of shake our heads and realize, look, it's not just about finding exceptions. You know, it can be so much more than that. And especially when you layer on, that was a great example, because so many people, they start doing a data analytic and then they throw their hands up and they're like, I got 1,000 false positives. How the hell am I going to do this? Right. And so they just stop. They're like, oh, it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because you didn't set it up right to begin with. And when you layer in some of these other red flag kind of issues, you understand how it works, and you're using all of the analytics together as a process instead of just a project, then it makes things much, much easier. And I'm all about easy. Well, Nathan, thank you for taking the time today. Like I said, I learned stuff today too, actually talking with you, and kind of got some clarity about a few things as to maybe why some people still just have such a hard time with data analytics, you know. And so, you know, if you're trying to do it, rewind and listen to this again, because you're going to find some things of like, oh, that's probably one of the mistakes that I'm making, and maybe why it's not working quite the way that I want it to, you know. And quit trying to recreate the wheel. Just, you know, if somebody's already figured it out, then leverage what they're doing. So Nathan, thanks for sharing with everybody today. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you later on the next show. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy at ondemand.criskacademy.com. And that's C as in the letter C, riskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you also will have access to the video version of today's show. The views and opinions expressed on this show are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.